let's talk now about our cutting layout for the Daring Duster. I'm just going to demonstrate here an example of what a cutting layout might look like. Yours may vary depending on the size that you're making and also the width of your fabric. This happens to be size A, and this fabric is 60 inches wide, and it's on the fold, and the fold is right here. So when you cut out, of course, you're going to cut double. So I'll show you first the layout for the view A, which is the vest or the gilet straight cut style vest, and then I'll show you what you'd want to do for view B, which has the sleeve and the collar. And there's also a couple different pocket options. And I'll also show you what you might want to do just to save yourself a little time and trouble when it comes to cutting out this pattern. So let's go over to the cutting table. We'll start with the front and the backs. You're going to need two fronts and two backs. And again, this is laid out with the fold here along the bottom. Let me fix that angle a little bit so you can see. Yeah, the fold is down here along the bottom. And of course, your grain line needs to run parallel to that fold. So what I like to do, just to make sure that everything is on grain, is just measure that grain line to the fold. So it's like 3 1/4 inches here, 3 1/4 inches here, 3 1/4 inches there. So you can be certain that that's parallel. And then I would do the same up here for the backs. And I would do it for all the pieces, just to make certain that everything is going to be on grain. Once you've got that done, you can lay out, those are the big pieces, of course, for view A, and then you'll want to lay out your smaller pieces. If you're going to do the patch pocket, there's just 2 of those, and you can just slot those in really anywhere. I'll just kind of put it over here. And then you've got your yokes, and you need 4 of those. You need, or 2 mirrored pairs, because of course it's a double yoke, and so you need 4 of them. Usually what I like to do is just either trace off or print off a spare yoke so that I can just cut them out simultaneously instead of making 2 copies of them. And you can, if you wanted to, you can do it on grain, which would be this way, and you would lay it out again with the grain line going parallel. Or if you wanted to do bias, if you have a stripe or a plaid or just some interesting fabric and you wanted to do it on the bias, you can do it that way. And I'll just quickly show you how to do that. Here you have your yoke piece, and here's the grain line, and of course it's going to be parallel to the folder or parallel to the selvage. And to do a bias, what you do is just line that up. If you have one of these quilting rulers, it's very handy for this sort of thing. As you can see, there's a 45-degree angle marked on here, and you just can lay that onto your grain line like so, and draw a new grain line. And you can even mark it as bias if you want to get fancy. And that will be your bias cut. And then you can lay that out with that grain line, that bias grain line, going parallel to the selvage and parallel to the fold. And again, as I did before, I would measure that to make certain that it's precise. With bias, it has to be precisely 45 degrees or you'll run into trouble. So I would take the time to do that. Again, of course, with the pocket too. If you decided instead of the patch pocket, that even for view A, for the vest, you wanted to do the inseam pocket, then you need to make 4 of them. 2 mirrored pairs, because of course you need two of the pockets, because they're going to go in here, right? And you'll need 2 of them on each side. So you'll need to Tetris this around a bit, like so. You'll have to figure that out to get that to fit. But that is how I would manage the layout for this. And now I'll show you how you can also manage the layout for view B with the sleeve and the collar pieces. here's the collar piece for the Daring Duster. Often with sewing patterns, the collar will be cut on the fold, and you'll have to cut 4 of them because, of course, you need an under collar and a top collar. And the collar piece would be like this. And I don't like that, and here's why. I find when I cut a collar on the fold, it goes wonky. It almost always goes wonky, and it almost always, no matter how hard I try, doesn't come out quite right. So I like to just have it as one big piece, and I also think it's easier this way because then you can just cut 2, and you can cut them, you know, you can just cut it all at once along with everything else. Again, be sure to measure that so that it's on grain. And then here is the sleeve piece. Sleeve is a larger piece than you might expect because it is a one sleeve piece and it does wrap around like this, of course. And then at the bottom, there's a couple of options here. If you want to have a same cuff and you want it to go on the inside, the cuff is going to go on the inside. And again, just to show you what that looks like, if you want the same cuff, it's a self-faced cuff with the slit like this, and then it's on the inside, and I've just finished the raw edge with a little bit of white bias so you can see it here. And if that's the look that you want, then you're just going to cut the whole piece out of your main fabric. If you decide that you want a contrast cuff, it says cut here for contrast cuff, but also what you can do, of course, if you want to just preserve this entire sleeve piece for later, is you can just fold it. You know, and in fact, that's really what I would do. I didn't put fold here just because I thought, well, that's going to, you know, you want to cut the fabric, but, you know, for the purposes of preserving the pattern piece, of course, you could just fold it and then cut it. And then, of course, you'll want to have your interfacing or contrast cuff is piece 8. If you were doing the same face cuff like I just showed you, you'll just use this piece here for the interfacing. And the interfacing, of course, is going to fit just here. You're just going to have a little iron-on or sew an interfacing that's just along here. You can see how that all matches up. And if you wanted to do a contrast cuff, of course, you would cut this out of a different fabric. And there's just this little bit. This is a 5/8 or a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. And that's just the seam allowance, of course, for here. And you can see how those fit together. So your choice, whatever you fancy, go for it. That's the cutting layout. It's not too complicated. So now I am going to get busy cutting this out. And next I will see you over at the sewing machine.